What's good, y'all? It's Crow from Out the Box. Welcome to my new channel, Out the Box Film Reviews. For those that are already familiar with me, you most likely know me through my other YouTube channel, Out the Box TV, where I've done over 12 years of interviews with amazing hip hop artists. Or also my other YouTube channel, Out the Box Media, where I've done a number of hip hop album reviews as well. So, fun fact about me is that I'm also a big movie fan, and I've been thinking of this idea of launching a new YouTube channel specifically to talk about my favorite films of the year and also to do individual review videos on new films that I like. So, those are the main things you're going to get with this channel. And for my first video, I felt it would be fitting to give you a countdown on my top 10 favorite films of 2024, right? It is 2025, so thought it would be cool to just take a look back at 2024 and just highlight some of my favorite films that came out to kind of kick things off in this new year. Now, I also want to make the distinction that these films that I'm going to be counting down were films that were released in the US in 2024 and not necessarily when they debuted at film festivals. So, yeah, I'm really just going to be doing a top 10 countdown, and also I'm going to be doing some honorable mentions before I get to that number one spot. So, yeah, man, without further ado, let's just go right ahead and kick it off to my number 10 favorite film of 2024. So, my number 10 favorite film of 2024 is Kinds of Kindness. This was a film by director Yorgos Lanthimos, the director of the award winning Poor Things film, that I got a chance to see a few months ago. And it certainly resonated with me. It was one of those films that really comes together after watching the full thing and taking some time to think back and reflect about what I just saw, right? I know some movie critics out there have said that it has too many different segments and should just be one straight movie instead of this film that has these three different segments in them. Although they do have a meaningful connecting point, I want to point out. But just to give an idea of how this film is structured, it's structured as a triptych fable, which is a work of art that's divided into three segments. Now, contrary to what other critics think about this film in regards to those three different segments that make up this one film, I feel like having those three different segments or three mini films within this one film really helped me to appreciate the overall film even more. It made me intrigued to watch the entire thing again and really just decipher the underlying themes Yorgos was trying to present with this film. It's ultimately a film about how some people will go to extreme lengths to get other people to be pleased with them or even accept them. He displays this message through main actors Jesse Plemons and Emma Stone across the three different segments. And though each segment has their own separate journey, they all have one connecting character in common and an overall message relating to wanting to be accepted. The film has a lot of intriguing moments that make you question the deeper motive behind certain characters and their actions. This film might be worthy of watching at least a couple of times just to see if you learn something new. But it really taps into the psychology of the characters, both main and supporting, to study why they come to certain conclusions. Overall, awesome film. My ninth favorite film of 2024 is Conclave. Now, this film, I have to say, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I thought it would be boring when I first heard about it in theaters, but I didn't really know anything about it at first. But I recently got to see it when it came out on Peacock, on the Peacock platform, and it certainly delivered. It's a movie where Cardinal Thomas Lawrence, played by Ralph Fiennes, organizes a papal conclave to elect the next pope. But in the process, he finds himself investigating secrets and scandals about each candidate. The film is calmly intense. It makes you feel one with Cardinal Lawrence's experience, where he's continually attempting to make the right decision. There are those factors of nobility and integrity that exist, and a storyline that continues to unfold but keeps the suspense on what next secret will be revealed. Overall, it's a very intriguing watch, and as you continue to observe the film, it makes you want to keep rooting for the main character, played by Fiennes. It's an overall really well produced and directed film. So my eighth favorite film of 2024 is Problemista. This film was super interesting to watch. From the opening scene, I have to say I felt like this was going to be a unique, one of a kind film, and it certainly lived up to those expectations. The journey that the two main characters, known as Alejandro and Elizabeth, the journey that they take on is one that feels chaotic, but you get the sense that it's going to lead somewhere successful in the long term. But it keeps you anticipating because you never know when or where that success comes. Alejandro and Elizabeth both have individual goals they're trying to achieve, and they are hopeful that working together, they will get there. But their experience is rarely ever fun. It feels like Alejandro gains more from this experience, but there's also things that Elizabeth gains as well. This film embodies the journey of patience and perseverance and mentorship and just approaching things from a different perspective. It may seem confusing at times on where the direction of this film is going, but I would say stick with it. It certainly pays off in the long run. My seventh favorite film of 2024 is The Fall Guy. This movie was one I kept hearing about throughout the year. I was reluctant at first to watch it because it just seemed like an action flick with lots of hype that I probably was not going to enjoy as much. I mean, I'm not a big action film guy anyway, so you could probably understand why I also recently got around to watching this movie. But I have to say, this was a really good film. There were a lot of cool action scenes, but I was much more intrigued by the storyline, the plot, the surprises, and true intentions of characters revealed. This film has some really strong replay value because there's a lot that happens that makes you want to go back and retrace how things ended up a certain way. This movie hits a lot of movie genre subjects. Like, it obviously has action, right? There's comedy, there's mystery, there is relationships, there's rom-com stuff happening. It's a rewarding film from start to finish, and you're kept intrigued throughout the entire film. My sixth favorite film of 2024 goes to The Beekeeper. I wanted to see this movie, honestly, when it first came out in January of last year, and I didn't get around to it until a few months after. But boy, did I enjoy it. Jason Statham might be one of my favorite actors today. This is one of those films that's full of action, but strong on integrity, and really just about someone who's looking out for others that were done wrong or taken advantage of. He's like your human superhero in this film. Everything the villains try to throw at him, the main character, Adam Clay, who's played by Jason Statham, they pretty much fail, right? And he continues to overcome by being smart, by being witty, and super strong combat wise. There's some pretty funny moments in the film as well, but the action journey and the suspense of where this plot takes you, the viewer, is what's most compelling. Action films are generally not my vibe, but when it's done right with a story of nobleness and concern like this, I think it's pretty amazing. Certainly one of my favorite action movies of the year, if not my actual favorite. So my fifth favorite film of 2024 goes to Civil War. This film was really unique for me. It really didn't come together message wise until watching the entire thing and reflecting. It takes you through a journey of what life would possibly look like if a civil war were to take place in modern America, right? I heard a number of film critics say they would only watch this movie once, but I'd probably watch it just one more time to get a better gist of what the different parties are that make up the different viewpoints in this particular civil war. Aside from the journalists who pretty much stay neutral in their political perspective, but really put their passion for journalism on display. This movie touches some really deep emotions in terms of the people's connection and obsession with political perspectives and the racism and prejudice that sometimes, unfortunately, exists amongst these perspectives. It addresses political corruption and the people's responses to it on multiple sides. There's one scene in the film featuring actor Jesse Plemons that is so intense that it actually makes this film way more impactful. Like, if this scene was not in the film, this film, in my opinion, wouldn't be as impactful. And that scene kind of brings you to the core of why the war has even gotten to this place of intensity. This film will make you take a moment and reflect about the outcome of political disagreements that turn into bigger issues amongst the people of the nation. This is a pretty unique film, and it's told through the lens of the journalist capturing the experience of the Civil War. It starts off from intense to little more intense to not so intense to more intense again. I mean, you get a full scope clearly of what it feels like to be a journalist in this situation. And at times, you also get a scope of what it feels like to be a neutral civilian. It's a pretty intriguing film to watch, and most of all, unique. I've yet to see a war themed film like this. So, my fourth favorite film of 2024 is The Book of Clarence. This is a film that I really enjoyed. And when I finally got to see it earlier last year, I was really impressed. Usually, when you hear of biblical theme films, the story is rarely told in this manner. Certainly, you rarely, if ever, get to see a mostly black cast, especially with regards to the main characters. And it's often not in the historical fiction format that this movie takes. Now, Clarence is the main character, but he's also not a factual biblical character. But that doesn't in any way take away from the intriguing story and the film's underlying message, which really has a lot to do with faith in the higher being, particularly Jesus Christ in this story. The way in which this film was told, it only enhances the message of the movie even more. In a nutshell, Clarence is a struggling man living in AD 33 Jerusalem who owes money to a loan shark known as Jedediah the Terrible. He's also an atheist and non-believer in Jesus Christ. And this is happening at the time and also post the time that Christ himself is making his rounds amongst the people of the land, performing miracles to those in need. So, people are generally in awe and of gratitude of Christ at that time. However, one day Clarence gets this idea to impersonate Jesus as though he is the real Messiah and find a way to perform these fake miracles, which people perceive to be real, hence tricking them to think he's the Messiah as well. He's doing this as a means to make money and pay back the debt he owes Jedediah. Long story short, he goes on a series of journeys and challenges to repay his debt and also overcome the accusations that he's not the Messiah, which gets him into a lot of trouble. But through it all, he eventually leads to becoming a believer and has to change his actions. That's all I say in regards to what's happening in the film, but the movie captured my attention from start to close, and the music, the soundtrack really helped keep my attention even more. The soundtrack has a modern soul vibe to it. If you have a biblical open mind to stories like these, I think you'll really enjoy this film. It deals with belief and faith in a higher being in a heartwarming, emotional manner that I believe will have you smiling at the end of the film. So, my number three favorite film of 2024 goes to The 688. And I just got a chance to see this film. Obviously, it just came out in December on Netflix. And I have to admit, when I first heard about it, I was naturally excited to see it because of the history it tells that I didn't even know about. But then somehow I saw someone give a brief response to the movie that was negative. The person was referring to it as a low budget film that made me a little apprehensive to watch it right away. But boy, am I glad I didn't take that response too seriously because I really enjoyed this film. It's pretty much about an all black female battalion in World War II who get called to strongly assist in helping American soldiers receive mail that was heavily backed up, sent in by their families back home. This proves to be an extremely difficult task for the 688 Battalion, which is made up of all Black women. They have to endure a lot of challenges to accomplish this task. The most impactful character in the film to me is Captain Charity Adams, played by Kerry Washington. Kerry Washington, I have to say, really did her thing with this movie. It honestly might be one of the best roles I've ever seen her play. This movie hits home as a Black person watching for numerous reasons, but the storyline is also very compelling and leaves you in awe of what comes with the journey of struggle, racism, prejudice, being overlooked, and the ability to persevere through it all, no matter how challenging things may be. It reminds me of what our ancestors had to endure not too long ago dealing with slavery and how resilient they had to be to survive and overcome the racism and prejudice of that time. It makes me feel like if they could overcome what they had to deal with, then I could pretty much achieve anything. So I definitely want to say kudos to Tyler Perry for making this film. It was well worth the viewing. Big ups. My second favorite film of 2024 goes to Dune 2, which is a pretty fascinating film. And I have to say, it was a struggle to put this film in the number 2 spot because for quite some time it was looking like it was going to be my number 1. But when you see what I chose as my number 1 and I explain my reasons for that, you'll get an idea why I chose that as my number 1. But nevertheless, Dune was a pretty fascinating film. Like I said, it had some amazing visual effects, really good storyline, a series of surprises, and a backstory of characters revealed as the movie develops. For someone like me, completely new to the Dune story, it was pretty cool to watch this. Although I have to admit, I did watch Dune 1, which came out in 2021. And I would recommend you do watch that first because it helped me to appreciate this film even more. Although I will say it's not completely necessary, I think you'll still enjoy the film, but I certainly think it's better knowing what happened in Dune 1 leading up to Dune 2. I also feel like because I didn't read any of the Dune books, the suspense and what is revealed was much more satisfying for me watching this film. The main things that stand out for me in this film are the visual effects that at times make you feel like you're right there in person with the main character, Paul Atreides, as he's fighting through some of his obstacles. I also thoroughly enjoyed the surprises that we get and the full identity revealed of certain characters. This movie completes the puzzle from part 1 and to me establishes itself as the better of the two films. It also has a pretty amazing ending and seems very rewarding to rewatch. I mean, it's almost 3 hours long, so take the time as you need to. I've only watched it once so far, but I feel like you will learn some new things when you rewatch this again. But yeah, that's my take on Dune 2. Amazing movie all around. Now, before I go to my number 1 favorite film of 2024, I do want to take some time to recognize some of my honorable mentions. So these are films that I felt were really also really good, but they just didn't make my top 10 favorite. So I'm going to do that really quickly. So the first of my honorable mention goes to The Wild Robot. Second is The Hitman. Also, I have Emilia Perez as my third and Inside Out 2 as my fourth. Now, these films are not in any particular order. I just wanted to highlight them. I think these were really amazing films. Inside Out 2 and Wild Robot, I think were the two best animated films that I've seen this year. But yeah, so I just wanted to shout that out. All right. So the moment you've been waiting for is the moment for my number 1 favorite film of 2024. So without further ado, let's just get right to it. My number 1 favorite film of 2024 goes to The Promised Land. Now, like I said earlier, Dune 2 was in my number 1 spot for a little while, but I kept thinking, I was like, man, I got to be true to myself, right? Like, I gotta go with the film that really impacted me the most, right? That I felt was like the best film that I watched this year. And without a doubt, that was The Promised Land. This movie is certainly um, really up there as my favorite. And it's mainly because of the heartwarming story and what it develops into. I was hesitant to watch this film at first because I feel like movies with this 18th century barren land setting are not usually movies that pique my interest right away. And I also felt like the story would go slow and boring. But boy, was I wrong. I feel like all you have to do is give the beginning of this movie like the first 5 to 10 minutes of your undivided attention, and you'll be focused in. It gets to the plot pretty quickly and delivers more and more as the film continues to develop. If you're someone like me who's big on films where the character displays integrity and nobility, I think you'll certainly appreciate this film on a really special level. The actor that plays the main character, Ludwig Kali, as well as the supporting actresses, Anne Barbara and Anne May Mus, they also do a really awesome job with this film. Minus some of the side scenes, it's in general a rewarding movie experience from beginning to end. And as I reflected more and more about what my favorite film of the year is, it just clearly made it as my number one. There's still a few more movies I have to see, but this one is it based on what I've seen so far. The storyline moves slow and on the quieter side for the majority of the film, but you never lose interest. Once you figure out what the story is about, you get hooked and you want to know what happens down the line. Just an overall brilliant film. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. So there it is, y'all. I want to thank y'all for tuning in for my first video, which was a countdown of my favorite films of 2024. And I encourage you to look out for more videos where I will be doing individual reviews on specific movies and, as they come out, or movies as I see them for the first time. So be on the lookout for that. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated when new videos are released. And yeah, keep rocking with me, man. I want to thank you all again for tuning in and wish you all the best in 2025. Happy New Year. And I'll catch y'all on the next one. Take it easy.